All right, so let me be clear. I'm not suggesting that every single site should be built with Google Sheets as the CMS. But did you know that you can query a Google Sheet and deploy an API endpoint with JSON data? This makes perfect sense for a very, very basic CMS. In my case, I was building out a simple one-page site for a friend, and he wanted to update the value of a text field like twice a year. Now, I was just going to go in there and change it for him twice a year, but I figured if I can give him the power to do this, then I also don't have to update it for him. Now, he's not very techy, and I didn't want to set up an entire CMS for him, even a simple one. In this video, I'll walk you through how to set up a simple API endpoint using Google Sheets in under 10 lines of code. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public, where I teach you through what I am currently learning. In this case, let's jump straight into this Google Sheets CMS that I created. I'm using an Astro project, but it doesn't really matter the stack you're using. You can see here there that I've got an array of different objects that each have a name and an hour string, and then I'm outputting them here. Now, the way this works in Astro is you've got this front matter that's server side or run on build, and then you've got all this that's actually visible in the client. And here I'm mapping over that array and then outputting each of them to a time card. That time card then just takes in the data and displays it with the name and the hours down here. So all we're going to do now is set up a Google Sheet to basically replace all of this so that it can be dynamic on page build, or you can even do this client side as JavaScript if you want to as well. Okay, so let's go over here. First of all, I've got this Google Sheet right here, and all I'm going to do is grab this, and we're just going to output them all right here. All right, and through the magic of editing, there we go. Now that I've got this data in here, all I want to do is query this data right here with a Google script. So you can do that by coming over here, and let's give a little bit more room. I think it's under extensions and then app scripts. Now, right over here, this opens up a little project where you can then write your own code. This is basically JavaScript. It's Google script, but close enough. And in this case, what I want to do, I'll just call this like get hours or something like that for the project. All right, now over here, all we need to do is write a function that we can then get. All right, and the way you do that is with this web app function. You have to name it do-get, just like this. So I'll leave a link to this in the description. This is one of the posts I found that was helpful in figuring this out. So I'm just going to change this to do and to get. And then what we're going to do is query the document itself. So the first thing I need to do, there's a bunch of classes you can interact with. One of them is called spreadsheet app, and then we'll do .get active spreadsheet. And this is getting the actual spreadsheet here, right over this way. So it's getting this spreadsheet over here. The next thing I want to do is then get the sheet name. So I'll say const sheet, and this will be equal to doc.get sheet by name, and we'll just pass the name. In this case, let's call it something like hours, which means I need to make sure that this says hours. So we'll say hours. Okay, so it's going to get that exact sheet. Now I'm in the sheet, and at this point, I want to get the values. So I'll say const values. And here what I'm going to do is get a range in the sheet. So I'll say sheet.getRange. And here what I'm going to pass it is a row, a column, and then basically how many to go over each direction. So we're going to start at 1, 1, and I'm going to go to 5, to 5, 2. Make sure to separate those by commas. Now just to make sure that this is clear what we're doing, let's come over here. We'll console.log this. As soon as I do this and I save, you'll see that this function is available for me to run. So I'm going to click run. Now this brings up an important point that you first of all have to give this permission. So I'm going to click review permissions, open view permissions, and then I'll log in here, and I'll click advanced and then get hours unsafe. So this is just basically giving it permissions to run the code that I'm going to write, which I have no problem doing. So there we go. All right, so here we go. We've got all this stuff, and you can see that it's now spitting out all this info down this way. Let's go ahead and run this now. You can see that I'm getting all of this information, so all the items here. Now, what I want to do is not just like display this with all these different methods available to it. What I want to do is at the end of this say get display values. So we get the actual values that have been displayed, and that's what we're going to run again. And now you should see just those items, Monday, Tuesday, etc., etc. So all we're doing is starting at 1, 1 and going down to 5, 2. So if I came over here, this would be 1, 1, and then it'd go down to 5, 2. I should mention briefly, if you didn't get that initial screen, you just got an error when you tried to run that, just run it a couple times or maybe refresh the page and then do it again. And eventually that should pop up. Sometimes it doesn't work right away. It just says error. So just so you know, you have to give it permission, and that might be the error you're getting. Okay, so now what we want to do is transform that data. Instead of being an array of arrays, I want it to look more like this over here. So let's come in here and I'm going to say const result. And we'll just set this equal to a values.map. I just want to map over each of the values. We'll just call them H for hour, I guess. And then since we're returning an object here for each of these items, I've got to wrap this in parentheses because that's just how JavaScript works. We're going to give the name here the very first item in the array, and then we'll give the hours the second item in the array. Okay, and that's it. We should get exactly what we want. Just to make sure, let's come down here and console.log, and we'll run it. You can see now we're getting the exact same thing that we have over here, which is what we want. Now, the last thing we need to do is somehow output this in a format that can be read to an API endpoint. So for that, Google actually gives us another class. I'm going to return here a content service.createTextOutput. And all we're going to do at this point is JSON.stringify. And I'm going to stringify data results. So in other words, I'm just creating a text output that says, hey, take all the data right here that's an object and just turn it into a string and assign it to something called data. Now, the last thing I need to do is to say that this is JSON. So what we'll do is just set this and set the content service here again to the MIME type of JSON, like that. Okay, so now I know exactly the type I'm getting, and this should return from this doGet function. And it does have to be named this once again. Okay, so that's all the code we're going to write here. Now all I'm going to do is deploy this to a new deployment. I need to come under selection type and choose web app, and then we'll name this something like get hours. Okay, and then what I can do is just say anyone on the internet can access this because all they're going to get is that data. And when I'm done here, I can come here and click on this, and you can see it's just a JSON endpoint with all that data. So really easy to get started with. So I'm just going to grab this right here, and instead of all of this, all we're going to do is comment this out. And I'll come in here and say const data equals await, and I can do top level await here in Astro, and then we'll just fetch that endpoint. Now once we get this back, maybe we should name this something like res so I don't have to change stuff down below. Then we'll say const data equals await res.json. So like any other endpoint, I'm hitting that endpoint and then returning back from it this data. So if I come over here and I refresh, you can see I'm actually getting a data map. Let me show you what this is and why it's causing problems here. So let's go ahead and comment this out. And then we'll reload. You see we're getting back data that has an array. That's what I need. So all I need to do here is just destructure data, and this should work for me. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll uncomment this out. And you can see that now this is live updating. So if I come back over here just to show you that this is working and change one of these to like 9 or something like that, I should be able to come over here and refresh. And now it says 9 because that API endpoint is live. So isn't that cool? You could just do that with a little simple script right here, no login or anything like that. Now, the way this works in Astro, this is all being done on build. So after you update the Google Sheet, you'd have to then build the site and have some kind of button that the user would click that would then hit a Netlify endpoint to build it. You could also do this server-side rendered though, and that would automatically query that each time somebody goes to the route. Or you could do this client-side JavaScript. I'll let you figure that out. But the main thing I wanted to show you is how to quickly get up and running with a little tiny endpoint that a user can update in kind of the most friendly CMS possible, just a spreadsheet that they're used to using. Of course, this spreadsheet itself can be locked down right now, it is, but I could share it with anybody in particular or make it public to the web, and anybody could update my store hours or my site hours or whatever. So just so you know, this can be locked down, but the API endpoint that we just created can be open and available for anybody to use. Well, I hope that's a help. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding. Hey, real quick, while I have you, during the month of September, which is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, I'm joining a fundraiser to raise money for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. If you donate, you have a chance to win some amazing items thanks to some generous sponsors. I have 5 licenses of Quokka Pro and Wallaby Pro code editor extensions. They're worth like $55 and $135 respectively. I also have 4 2-year team licenses from Cloud Cannon, the static site generator CMS, worth about $6,000 each. Now, St. Jude leads the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer. St. Jude helps cure cancer in 2 ways. First, they care for families without any cost to the family itself, for treatment, for travel, for housing, for food, for anything. Second, they're a research hospital, and they openly share their research with other doctors and scientists. Treatments invented at St. Jude have helped increase the overall childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to more than 80% since it opened more than 50 years ago. Like I mentioned, the teams behind Wallaby.js and Cloud Cannon have donated free licenses to their amazing software for me to give away as an added incentive for us to raise funds. Now, how would you win one of these giveaways? Visit the site linked in the description and click the donate button. Then, and this is important, forward me an email copy of your receipt at chris@codinginpublic.dev. I'll reply with a donor code so that you can reference it at the end of the month during our public drawing. I'll do a live stream on Friday, October 6th, 2023, and randomly generate those winner codes and display them on the screen. Now, just to be clear, donating does not guarantee you will win a giveaway. Each dollar you donate will earn you one raffle ticket. Winners will then be announced at the end of the campaign during that live stream. Finally, I want to say a huge thanks to Mike and Steven of Relay.fm, a podcast network I followed for a long time. They've made it very easy to set up a fundraiser attached to theirs during the month of September. Now, you're welcome to check out their story and see how our collective efforts over the last few years have helped raise resources for St. Jude. Let's defeat childhood cancer together.